Well, gang, this is our third Monday morning stand-up meeting. Are you all finding it as much of a pain in the neck as you thought you would in the beginning?
Well, when you said that 10 minutes was all that we take, I didn't believe you. But you know, I think it's working. And maybe having to stand up makes us concentrate a little better.
Well, this kind of planning meeting has really helped me out a lot, because now I know what everybody's working on and what things I need to get involved in before the week is out. And it's helped me to budget my time better, because now I plan around the important things that I know I have to get done.
Well, it sounds to me like you all think we ought to continue with them.
Definitely.
I do.
Yes.
Good. All right, now, I have to finish that revision of the department budget. And then I have to complete the first draft of the proposal to implement the computer programming for the payroll systems. Okay, who's next?
My biggest headache for the week is trying to get the month's invoices ready for the mail by Friday.
Yeah, and I have to do the part-time and full-time payrolls before I leave on my vacation. Jack and I sail this Saturday.
Oh, you're going to be gone on that cruise for 2 weeks, right?
Yes, that's right. And when Sandy gets back, it's going to be time for me to take my time off. Oh, boy, this sounds like the beginning of a problem. You know, we're all so busy concentrating in our own areas that, you know, we just don't have any ability to back up for somebody that's missing.
I think I see what you mean. But it's been like this for so long, I don't pay attention anymore. I just expect a crisis when one of us is sick or some other kind of emergency comes up. We've always been up the proverbial creek.
Yeah, and with the company's freeze on hiring, there's no way we can hire a backup person to fill in.
What about temps?
No, cut the budget on temporary help, too. And besides, temps always take so long to acquaint with our systems and procedures. They're probably the least effective stopgap in an emergency.
Well, whatever we do, I hope that we implement them before the fall and winter. The flu season just about wiped us out last year, remember?
Yes, I do remember. And that's just what I'm trying to avoid. Well, we need to get back to our planning for this week. But I tell you what, let's all get together Wednesday morning at 10. And we'll discuss this new problem. And in the meantime, I want all of you to think about some solutions.
Here's one rule with very few exceptions to it. People who fail to plan are planning to fail. Regardless of how competent and well-trained employees may be, changes and improvements won't take place unless some careful planning is done. There are two basic elements in planning. The first is assessing the future, or deciding what's likely to happen. And secondly, to build on that, what you'd like to occur. Whether you're planning for tomorrow's agenda or for the next 10 years, your plan should include those two elements. The American Management Association recently published a study showing how people actually divide their planning time. 38% is spent on problems that will occur during the same day. 40% on events or deadlines to take place within a week. 15% on things that will occur within 1 month, 5% on things that will occur in 3 to 6 months, and only 2% on things that will occur a year or more from now. Those percentages aren't absolute. But the most important aspect of the list is the message that few people focus on the future when they speak of planning. When some people talk about planning time, they really mean how to figure out a solution to some immediate problem. Now, the first step in the process of planning is to choose objectives. If your objectives or goals aren't clear-cut and carefully considered, then you're planning to fail. As a supervisor, you might have objectives that pertain to productivity levels, purchase or repair of equipment, staff development, a decrease in rejects or an increase in sales, or perhaps improved employee morale. Your first step in planning would be to establish specific, measurable objectives with a target date for accomplishing them. The next step is to communicate objectives to employees. Ideally, everybody should know what the organization's major objectives are, and the people working under you should know your objectives for your department or for them. If departmental goals blend with corporate objectives in the mind of workers, then you've done an effective job of communication. Now, we're essentially talking about what's called management by objectives. It's an effective way of ensuring that all employees know and understand what their company's objectives are and how their role will apply in reaching that. Now, there are 3 things to remember about the MBO, or management by objectives, concept. First, Employees should know what their objectives are. Workers can do their job for 30 years and never understand what their company's objectives are or even what their own goals should have been. In addition, many employees never understand what standards are being used to measure their performance. Every employee should know what's expected in clear-cut and simple terms. Employees should also know how performance will be judged and that a standardized evaluation process will be applied fairly. Secondly, employees should take part in setting their own objectives. One of the easiest ways to make sure that everyone understands objectives is to let everyone share in setting them. Joint goal setting can be a highly effective means of listing objectives that are both reasonable and comprehensive. And finally, employees should be evaluated according to what they accomplish rather than how they spend their time. The goal is to get the work done. Loyalty, trustworthiness, and bravery are worthy traits, but in a work situation, it's more important to ask, did you get the job done, or did you do it well? And in a few minutes, we'll go on with the rest of the steps in the planning process.
As today's session opened, you saw Lynn and her work group checking out each other's plans and priorities for the week. During that process, they discovered a need to do more long-range planning to avoid problems in the future. We now join them at the Wednesday meeting as they begin the steps of their planning process.
After our meeting last Monday, I prepared the staffing table. Now, we have all of the major functions across the top, and we're down the side here, and I've X'd in the jobs that I feel that we can all perform well. Now, this is where I need a little help from you all to update it. Have any of you knowledge in any of the other areas other than what I have marked up here?
I know a bit about travel advances.
Yeah, and I can do Beth's job since I had that job last year.
Okay, Beth. Thank you, Sandy. Anything else? Well, it certainly does show how much we need each other to be here, doesn't it? So, well, with this in mind, I have prepared a few objectives based on what the company expects of us and what I'd really like to see, come about in the department in the next 6 months. Here. I want to provide high-quality, uninterrupted accounting services to the organization at all times. Provide at least one backup for a minimum of 6 of the functions by November 1st. And develop total staff knowledge and appreciation for all jobs by January 1st. And then prepare all staff for promotional opportunities within the finance division by next June 1st. Now, if you're agreeable with all of these, I think I'll put them in my next quarter's objectives for Jim. Have you any additions or comments or questions?
It looks like you're leaning towards some kind of cross-training program, and as I've been thinking over the problem the past few days, that's what I figured we'd have to do, start training on each other's jobs.
Or the only other way would be to hire more staff, and we know that's out of the question. But we're also busy ourselves. How are we going to have time to learn each other's functions, and who's going to teach us?
Well, you're right, Sandy. We are going to be short of both people and time. But I really have the faith in you all that if we work on this together, that we'll be able to work it out. Let's face it. Look at this chart. You see how weak we are in coverage we've just got to. Well, now, Pam here is our most effective backup person because she's familiar with 3 major functions. And what I'd really like is for all of you to aim in that direction. I know it's going to be a lot of extra work, but it'll really pay off in the long run.
I'm still hung up on how we're going to get this done within the time frames of your objectives. The way I see it, we have 2 choices. Either you can train us, or we can train each other whenever we catch each other on coffee breaks.
Well, I really think this is high enough priority where we can do some pretty clever juggling as to managing our time, so that we can use it for training. I realize it will take some very clever scheduling.
Well, what about hiring someone that could come in and help and do the training with us?
Or how about the training department? Can't they help us in some way?
Those are both really good ideas. I guess it's up to me to make a few steps to get this off the ground.
And I bet one of them will be to convince old tightwad Jim that this is worthwhile.
Yes, I will have to get Jim's support. Absolutely right. And I'm really glad you all are so enthusiastic about this. Now, I've got to go off and do some work on my own, and I'll get back to you all as soon as I have something else to report. Now, what I want you to do is to be deciding what your needs and interests and directions are, and then get back to me by Friday, some objectives of what areas you really want to become proficient in and by when. I'll leave the chart up in my office so you can refer to it as often as you want to, and as soon as you get back to me with your objectives, I'll plug them in.
Lynn, it might be helpful for all of us to have a copy of your department objectives. Would you like me to type them up and get a copy out to everybody?
Thank you, Beth. That would be just fine. Oh, now I do have some other work to do, and I'll get back with you as soon as I have something to report. Meeting's over.
In beginning this planning process, Lynn has completed the first 2 steps, choosing objectives and communicating them to her employees. It's time for you to consider the following questions. 1, what might have happened if Lynn had not discussed her objectives with the work group? 2, give some reasons why this plan could fail. 3, could Lynn and her group handle this job without planning? After you have answered these questions, we will continue with the remaining steps in this all-important planning process. As you hear each step, think of what Lynn must do to get her project completed.
The third step in the planning process is to identify assumptions. Usually, the planner makes assumptions about what the future will be like based on current trends, predictions, and projections. This isn't the time for gazing into a crystal ball, but for gathering all the available information about what the future may hold in store. Then you evaluate your plan in terms of both the short and long-term implications of those assumptions. Next, you survey resources. This means considering what resources are available to help you meet your goals. Each work situation includes problems and promises that will affect the outcome of your objectives. For example, you may face limitations in time, money, workspace, number of employees, higher management considerations, material resources, and company, union, or government regulations. Once you identify the limitations, consider each one carefully to determine its impact. The next step is to check on policy. Sometimes the existence of policy blocks a direct path to the goal. Remember that the most direct route isn't always the most beneficial for the company or employees. It may be unethical, too expensive, or too difficult. You'll find some policies are based on logical, intelligent considerations, and then again, others may have become obsolete and should be retracted or changed. In any case, make sure that what you want to do doesn't run contrary to your organization's existing policies. The next step is to recognize and compare alternative plans. If there's only one possible course of action, planning isn't necessary. Planning is really a series of decisions. A careful consideration of alternatives can often solve a seemingly insoluble problem. Failing to consider alternatives can let you overlook an important option. In short order, you'll learn to rule out alternatives which are too costly, too time-consuming, unethical, or against policy. But it's always better to consider too many alternatives than to settle on one course of action without looking at others. When you've identified all the reasonable alternatives, begin to evaluate each one in terms of cost, availability, and expected results. Some alternatives will be subject to the limitations mentioned before, and will be less efficient than others, and some may be successfully followed through. Next, you choose a method. I'm sorry, but decisions aren't usually clear-cut or simple. Usually, a choice has to be made among alternatives only slightly more attractive than those already eliminated. In one of his fables, Aesop tells the story of a donkey that starved to death because it was an equal distance between 2 bales of hay. The donkey wanted to make the very best choice, but it deliberated until it was too late to choose either alternative. A supervisor who can't decide between alternative strategies and take a strong stand on his choice may be demonstrating some characteristics of the donkey family. Next, it's necessary to develop new procedures and rules. Once a decision's been made, try to determine how that decision will be implemented. What new requirements will be made of workers? How will their behavior be altered? What will be the best administrative procedures to use? How much paperwork will be involved? Creating and enforcing procedures are a necessary part of your job. All the planning in the world won't meet an objective without the cooperation and understanding of the employees involved. Procedures and rules are one means of ensuring that everyone understands what's expected. Now it's time to prepare a budget and timetable. Budgets are simply statements of expectations. They aren't hard and fast factual statements of what cost will actually be, but very careful estimates. Here's a budget prepared by Joe Jones, who decided he could increase production 15% within a year if he could replace several minor pieces of obsolete equipment, reorganize the workforce, and begin an employee incentive program. After Joe presents his budget to management, their job is to decide if his projected 15% increase in production is worth the expenditure of almost $16,000. He's given them the information they need in a clear, understandable, and usable format. If the current value of annual production is $200,000 or more, the firm will certainly pay serious attention to Joe's ideas. Part of his proposal includes a timetable. Joe estimates 3 months to complete the improvements and to establish the program in his plan. When February 15 arrives, Joe can determine at once whether the construction portion of his plan has been completed and whether the plan is proceeding according to his schedule. He will have also shown management that he's aware of time constraints in planning and budgeting and has established a realistic schedule to help him efficiently control each phase of his project. The final step in the planning process is to establish standards for evaluation. Once the completed plan is put into operation, that plan becomes a model of the expected results. For this reason, a careful supervisor builds controls into plans and determines in advance how performance will be evaluated. In one sense, evaluation can be a simple matter. If the project is completed and produces desired results, then it's clearly successful. Now, some of these planning stages may seem tedious and unnecessary, but they pay off when a plan achieves the stated objective. There's no better proof of a supervisor's capability and foresight.
Before we continue with decision-making, the second half of the planning process, take some time to answer these questions which may be found in your workbooks. 1, why take the time to plan? 2, what resources can be drawn upon? 3, do alternatives always exist? 4, why are budgets and timetables valuable?
Many people feel that decision-making ability forms the very core of supervision because every aspect of managerial responsibility involves making decisions and choosing among alternatives. In the final analysis, supervisors are paid for a very important job, making decisions. In fact, the job of supervising is essentially the job of making good decisions. You already know that planning is essentially a series of advanced decisions. Almost every supervisory task or responsibility involves major and minor choices following some simple steps. First, establish objectives for the end result. 2, generate alternatives. 3, evaluate those alternatives. 4, make the choice or decision. And 5, draw up a plan of action. No matter how large or small the decision, you must be sure to follow those basic steps. Next, I've developed 8 rules to help you whenever you're going through the decision-making process, and that's likely to be many times each day. These rules aren't cure-alls or substitutes for the job of decision-making, but they do provide a logical framework for collecting and analyzing information and reaching sound conclusions. First, collect the facts. When you have collected the available relevant facts, then make the decision. If all the information that's needed is not in, wait until you get it. This step is a valuable part of the process and also a valuable use of your time. Next, consult your feelings. Most supervisors develop an intuitive second sense which aids in decision making. Your knowledge and past experience are valuable guides, so don't overlook them. Third, try to time your decisions wisely. When you're tired or feeling low, your decisions tend to be aggressive and destructive. On the other hand, if you're feeling good, you're more tolerant and balanced. Understanding your moods and behavior is crucial for timing and decision making. Next, don't assume too much. Carefully weigh and interpret your emotions when they contradict all the available information. Filling in the gaps with intuition and then jumping to emotional conclusions can prove to be a dangerous game. 5, communicate your plan. You have to communicate your objectives to everyone involved. The person collecting information must tell you clearly what he or she has found. The people carrying out the solution need to know exactly what the problem is and how they're supposed to solve it. As you can see, decision-making often involves more people than the decision-maker alone. Communication failures can prevent even the most brilliant plan from succeeding. 6, make your decision flexible. Any good decision includes the flexibility to allow for unforeseen circumstances, new information. Remember that once you've said yes, it's very difficult to reverse that decision, but sometimes a no can be more easily changed to a yes if a changing situation demands it. 7, follow through with your decision. People who are afraid of action tend to spend most of their time perfecting never-used plans. If you have trouble getting past the getting ready stage, you can't be an effective decision maker, no matter how much information you manage to collect. If you find yourself searching for more information when enough is already available to make a good decision, you're probably avoiding the commitment necessary to put a decision into action. And finally, make your decisions with courage. When you finally face making a decision, you must ask yourself, will I have the courage to do what's right, even if everyone else doesn't agree? Andrew Jackson once said, one person armed with courage makes a majority. Remember that although others have provided input, the responsibility for making a decision ultimately rests with you, the supervisor. Any supervisor who can internalize the decision-making process by using intuition as well as facts should have little trouble dealing with minor problems or major crises. The key to successful decision-making lies in understanding the process, then deciding to decide.
In order for Lynn to move ahead with her plan, she needs to make a decision about how the cross-training is to be accomplished. In the scene that follows, we find that she has taken her objectives to her boss, Jim, with her decision for how to handle the plan. Now her job is to convince him. Be ready to give your evaluation of her decision-making ability.
Look, Jim, I've analyzed this thing from every possible perspective, and I think I've come up with a solution that's going to be the most cost-effective for the long run.
Well, I'm waiting. Let me see what you've got. So far, I agree with your objectives, and I'll back you on those 100%.
Well, if you agree with my target dates, I think you'll understand even more why I've chosen the course I have.
Spare me the suspense. I think you're stalling because you're going to cost me some money. Okay, how much?
Well, first, I'd like you to hear the alternatives, okay?
Sure.
I could teach them myself. But in order to do that, I'd have to use my own staff to train me in the functions that I'm not really familiar with. And then there'd be my lost time supervising and my consultation time with other departments, as well as those reports to management that nobody else can do but me. So I think I'm out this time.
I agree. What else have you thought of?
Well, they could train each other.
That's a good idea. It's done all the time.
I know, but my department's too small to absorb the lost time with 2 people in training. And besides that, they're just not teachers. And the worst possible thing is that I'd lose 2 functions and we'd be months behind in deadlines all the time.
I'm getting depressed. You better hit me with the good news soon.
Okay, here it is. I was talking to a consulting firm. The auditors had recommended them to me, and they've given me a proposal to perform a job similar to one they did for another accounting office recently.
What would they do and how much?
Well, they would come in, study all our jobs and functions, and then design a program around that where we could learn on the job with their people coaching. And they would provide their personnel as a backup for us during the training time, and all of it for $6,000.
Will they guarantee that you can maintain your current production level?
Yes, they did.
And how long would all this take?
Best part, 1 month for the study and 1 month for the training. Oh, Jim, it's the perfect answer. I know $6,000 is a lot of money, and times are pretty tight right now, but, well, it's so important for everybody. Do you think you could get the variance?
I don't want to get your hopes up prematurely, but I think it might be quite possible. Lynn, a lot of people besides me have been very happy with the work you're doing here. You've certainly turned around the department and its morale.
Remember how nervous I was when I first got promoted?
I sure do. I hope you're aware of how much you've grown on this job. And I want you to know that a lot of pretty important people in the finance division have been watching your performance. That's certainly going to help when I approach the vice president about this variance request.
Oh, thanks, Jim. Do you think I need to beef up the proposal any?
No, I don't think so, but I'd like to read it over once tonight.
Thanks again for your support. Boy, my staff will be just ecstatic if we can pull this off.
Lynn, I want you to know that I think that you've made some terrific decisions along the way. Nice going.
This brings us to the end of today's session on planning and decision-making. You have just seen Lynn making some significant plans and decisions which will gain her some visibility with upper management. Take some time now to answer these questions before you turn to the application exercises. A, evaluate Lynn's decision-making ability in terms of the 8 rules. B, if her proposal is approved, name the likely steps in her plan of action. Turn now to these questions in your workbook, and we hope to see you again soon.